Warriors, Into the Wild, Chapter 19. Greypaw and Ravenpaw were still patching the hole when Firepaw reached them. They had left a gap just wide enough for him to squeeze back through.
No luck with the garlic.
Firepaw panted as he slipped in.
Darkstripe's prowling around out there.
Never mind.
Mewed Greypaw.
We can get some tomorrow.
I'll go get you some poppy from Spotted Leaf.
Firepaw offered. He was worried by the dull look on his friend's eyes, and the way his muscles seemed to stiff with pain.
No, don't worry. I'll be fine.
It's no trouble.
Firepaw insisted, and before Greypaw could argue, he bounded off towards Spotted Leaf's den. She was pacing her small clearing, her eyes clouded with unhappiness.
Are you okay?
Firepaw asked.
The spirits of StarClan are restless. I think they're trying to tell me something.
She replied, flicking her tail uneasily.
What can I do for you?
I think Greypaw could do with some, poppy seeds for his leg. His rat bites are still hurting him.
The pain of losing Lionheart will make his injuries feel worse, but he'll mend in time, don't worry. In the meantime, you're right. Poppy seeds will help.
Spotted Leaf went into her den and brought out a dried poppy head. She placed it carefully on the ground.
Just shake out one or two and give them to him.
Thanks. Are you sure you're okay?
Go and see your friend.
Answered Spotted Leaf, avoiding his gaze. Firepaw picked up the poppy heads between his teeth and began to walk away.
Wait.
Spotted Leaf hissed suddenly. Firepaw spun around and expectantly met her tawny gaze. Her eyes burned back at him.
Firepaw. StarClan spoke to me moons ago, before you joined the clan. I sense they want me to tell you this now. They said only fire can save our clan.
Firepaw stared at Spotted Leaf, mystified. The strange passion faded from her eyes.
Take care, Firepaw.
She meowed in her normal voice and turned away.
See you.
Firepaw replied uncertainly. He padded back through the fern tunnel. Her strange words were echoing in his mind, but he could not make sense of them. Why had she shared them with him? Surely fire was an enemy to all who lived in the forest. He shook his head in frustration and bounded over to the apprentice's den.
Greypaw!
Firepaw hissed into the ear of his sleeping friend. They'd be allowed to rest all morning after working on repairs for most of the night. Tigerclaw had ordered them to be ready to begin training at sunhigh. The strong yellow light filtered through the den told Firepaw it was already near that now. He'd had a restless night. Dreams swirled through his mind each time he fell asleep, confusing and indistinct, but full of darkness and menace.
Greypaw!
Firepaw hissed again, but his friend did not stir. He'd eaten 2 of the poppy seeds before he slept, and now he was in deep slumber.
Are you awake, Firepaw?
Ravenpaw mewed from his nest. Firepaw spat silently under his breath. He had wanted to talk to Greypaw before Ravenpaw woke.
Yes,
he replied. Ravenpaw sat up in his bed of moss and heather and began to watch with quick flicks of his tongue.
Are you going to wake him?
He asked, nodding toward Greypaw. A deep voice growled outside their den.
I hope so. Training is about to start.
Firepaw and Ravenpaw jumped.
Greypaw, wake up.
Firepaw poked his friend with one paw.
Tigerclaw's waiting.
Greypaw lifted his head. His eyes were still heavy with sleep.
Are you ready yet?
Called Tigerclaw. Firepaw and Ravenpaw crept out of the den, blinking as they emerged into the sunlight. The deputy was sitting beside the tree stump.
Is the other one coming?
Yes.
Firepaw replied, feeling defensive on behalf of his friend.
He's only just woken up.
Training will do him good,
growled Tigerclaw.
He's grieved for long enough.
Firepaw held the menacing amber gaze for a few moments. Warrior and apprentice, For a heartbeat, their eyes were locked as enemies. Greypaw scrambled sleepily out of a den.
Blue Star will be ready for you in a moment, Firepaw.
The words distracted Firepaw from his anger. His first training session with Blue Star. Excitement surged through him. He had expected his wounded mentor to be resting still.
Greypaw, you can join my training session. Do you think you're up to it, Ravenpaw?
He glowered at his apprentice.
After all, you got some pretty nasty nettle stings, while the rest of us were fighting those rats.
Ravenpaw looked at the ground.
I'm fine.
Greypaw and Ravenpaw followed the deputy out of a camp entrance. Ravenpaw's head hung low as he disappeared through the gorse tunnel. Firepaw sat and waited for Blue Star. She did not keep him long. The Grey Queen emerged from her den and padded across the clearing. Her fur was still matted in places where her wounds were fresh, but she betrayed no pain in her confident stride.
Come,
She called to him. Firepaw noticed with surprise that she was alone. Darkstripe and Longtail were nowhere to be seen. A thought occurred to him, and suddenly his excitement was tinged with anxiety. Here was an opportunity to tell Blue Star what he had overheard last night. He caught up with her as she headed for the gorse tunnel and fell in step behind her.
Will your guards be joining us?
Blue Star replied without looking back.
I've ordered Darkstripe and Longtail to help with the camp repairs. Securing ThunderClan's base is our first priority.
Firepaw's heartbeat quickened. He would tell her about Ravenpaw as soon as they left camp. The two cats followed the trail to the training hollow. The place was strewn with freshly fallen golden leaves that rustled beneath their paws. Firepaw's mind raced as he searched for suitable words. What should he tell his leader? That Tigerclaw was plotting to get rid of his apprentice? And what would he say when Blue Star asked him why? Could he bring himself to say out loud that he suspected Tigerclaw had killed Redtail, even though he had no evidence beyond Ravenpaw's excited storytelling at the gathering? By the time they reached the sandy hollow, Firepaw had still not spoken. The hollow was empty.
I asked Tigerclaw to hold his training session in another part of the forest today.
Blue Star explained as she padded into the center of the hollow.
I want to concentrate on your fighting skills, and I want you to concentrate on them too, which means no distractions.
I must tell her now.
Thought Firepaw.
She needs to know about the danger Ravenpaw is in.
His paws prickled with anxiety.
I won't have another chance like this.
Sudden movement flashed into the corner of his eye. A swish of grey rolled past his nose, and Firepaw fell forward as his forepaws were knocked lightly from underneath him. He staggered, regained his balance, and spun around to see Blue Star sitting calmly beside him.
Do I have your attention now?
Yes, Blue Star. Sorry.
He replied hastily, looking into her blue eyes.
That's better. Firepaw, you have been with us for many moons now. I have watched you fight. With the rats you were quick. With the ShadowClan warriors you were fierce. You outwitted Greypaw on that first day we met. And you defeated Yellowfang with your own cleverness too.
She paused, then lowered her voice to an intense hiss.
But one day, you will meet an opponent who are all of these things as well. Quick and fierce and clever. It is my duty to prepare you for that day.
Firepaw nodded, completely caught up in her words. His senses were fully alert. All thoughts of Ravenpaw and Tigerclaw had disappeared, and the musty odors of tiny noises of the forest rushed in upon him.
Let's see how you fight! Attack me!
Firepaw looked at her, sizing her up and wondering the best way to begin. Blue Star was standing less than 3 rabbit lengths away. She was twice his size, so it would be a waste of effort to begin with the usual paw swipes and wrestling. But if he could leap straight onto her back with a powerful enough jump, he might be able to unbalance her. She hadn't taken her piercing blue eyes off of him for an instant. Firepaw stared back and leapt. He had aimed to land squarely on her shoulders, but Blue Star was ready for him. She dropped swiftly into a crouch. As Firepaw hit her, she rolled onto her back. Instead of landing on her shoulders, he found himself crashing down toward her upturned belly. She caught him with all 4 paws and flung him easily away from her. Firepaw felt he had been bundled away like a bothersome kit. He hit the dusty ground hard and lay winded for a moment before he scrambled to his feet.
Interesting strategy, but your eyes betrayed where you were aiming,
Growled Bluestar as she stood up and shook the dust from her thick coat.
Now, try again.
This time, Firepaw looked at her shoulders but aimed for her paws. When Bluestar dropped to the ground, he would hit her as she crouched. Firepaw felt a rush of satisfaction as he leapt, but it turned to confusion as Bluestar unexpectedly sprang into the air and let him crash into the ground where she had stood just a heartbeat before. She timed it perfectly. As he landed, she thundered down on top of him, squashing the breath out of him.
Now try something I don't expect.
She hissed into his ear, climbing off him and backing away with a challenging gleam in her eyes. Firepaw scrambled up, panting, and shook himself crossly. Even Yellowfang had not been so tricky. He hissed and leapt again. This time, as he flew at Bluestar, he stretched out his forepaws. She reared up onto her hind legs and used her forepaws to twist him away. As he felt himself slipping, Firepaw scrambled with his hind paws into the sand, but it was too late, and he flopped heavily onto his side.
Firepaw.
Bluestar meowed calmly as once more he struggled to his paws.
You are strong and quick, but you must learn to keep control of your speed and body weight so that it's not so easy for me to unbalance you. Try again.
Firepaw backed away, hot, dusty, and out of breath. Frustration raged through him. He was determined to get the better of his mentor this time. Slowly, he crouched and began to creep toward Bluestar. She mirrored his crouch and hissed into his face as he approached. He raised a paw and swiped at her left ear. She ducked to avoid a strike and reared up, towering over him. Quickly, Firepaw rolled onto his back, slithered beneath her body, and in one fast movement kicked both his back legs upward into her belly. Bluestar was flung backward and fell onto the sandy earth with a loud grunt. Firepaw flipped himself over and leapt to his paws. He felt jubilant. Then he saw Bluestar lying in the dirt and for the first time remembered her wounds. Had he reopened them? He dashed to her side and stared down at her. To his relief, her eyes glinted proudly back at him.
That was much better.
She stood and shook herself.
Now it's my turn.
She sprang at him, knocking him to the ground, then retreated and let him pick himself up before leaping again. Firepaw braced himself, but she bowled him over easily again.
Look at my size, Firepaw. Don't try to stand up against my attack. Use your wits. If you're fast enough to avoid me, then avoid me.
Firepaw scrabbled to his feet again, preparing for her attack. This time, he didn't dig his paws into the soft ground, but stood lightly, keeping his weight on his toes. As Bluestar flew toward him, he hopped neatly out of her path, reared up onto his hind legs, and, with his forepaws, pushed her flying body onward past him. Bluestar landed gracefully on all four paws and turned.
Excellent. You learn quickly. But that was an easy move. Let's see how you deal with this one.
They trained until sunset. Firepaw heaved a sigh of relief when he heard Bluestar meow.
That's enough for today.
She seemed a little tired and stiff, but she leapt easily out of a sandy hollow. Firepaw scrambled after her. His muscles were aching, and his head spinning with all he had learned. As they trekked together back through the trees, he couldn't wait to tell Greypaw and Ravenpaw about his training session. And it wasn't until they reached the camp boundary that Firepaw realized he'd forgotten to tell Bluestar about Ravenpaw.